Hello viewers and listeners, this is Matt, and today on this video I'm going to compare and look into two of the biggest open world video games of this decade so far. These two games being The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now before I get into the meat of this video, I'm only going to be analyzing the video games. Both of these games come from very successful franchises and we're not looking at anything else from them, just these two very successful video games. I've also sunk many hours and playthroughs into each of these games, and I know many trivial and stupid things about them, so you can tell that I'm already a credible person and know what I'm talking about. And finally, remember that these are my opinions on both of these games. Do not get triggered and do not get mad. If you want to discuss these, I'll be happy to do so. Now, let's get into the video. I've decided to split this video up into three categories: gameplay, story, and soundtrack, and I'll go over each one starting with gameplay. Skyrim has a very traditional way of doing combat. There's magic, melee, and range. The player is never forced to use any of these and has complete freedom of whichever one to use. In my opinion, the combat is kinda shallow. When you engage combat, all you do is hit your opponent repeatedly, you may block if you want, shove 10 cheese wheels down your throat, and repeat. Or you can just become a sneak person and just literally kill everybody effortlessly without them blinking an eye. However, the enemy variety compared to Breath of the Wild and Skyrim is much better. There are many different types of animals, creatures, humans, machines, a lot of things that will try to kill you, and you have to take different approaches to each one. However, besides dragons and giants at lower levels, none of the enemies feel really threatening after a while, even on very hard difficulties, because of how fast the enemies cap out in their levels. Breath of the Wild, on the other hand, takes a very different approach to any kind of combat I've seen in the game. Every weapon in the game is technically viable because of how fast they break. Because the weapons break so fast in combat, you actually have to put thought in if it's worth using your really best weapons against certain enemies, giving lower level weapons kind of value for taking out things that are not worth the durability of the larger weapons. Breath of the Wild also gives you tools called runes in-game that enhance the combat. You can freeze enemies and objects nearby with stasis and control magnetic items with magnesis. Even today, people are still finding interesting strategies with those weapons and runes, which shows you how depthful the combat is. On the other hand, the variety of enemies in Breath of the Wild is much more weaker than it is in Skyrim. The three main things you'll be killing most of the game are Bubblekins, Lizardfolks, and Moblins. The rest of the things are either bosses, pushovers, or things that die in literally one hit, or have a very exploitable weakness. There's also only 4 9-story bosses: Phoenixes, Stone Taluses, Moldugas, and Lynels. They get very repetitive very quick because they're the only few bosses in this game that are repetitively able to fight. However, if you ever fought a Lynel in Breath of the Wild, you will quickly understand how difficult they are. There is nothing in Skyrim that posed as much challenges as they did. They are immune to many of the game's cheap strategies, and they will test you on its mechanics. There are even some people who say the Lynels alone are harder than the final boss of the game. Overall, I do feel like Breath of the Wild has the more engaging combat, despite a lot of people not liking the mechanic of weapons constantly breaking. It does make the combat a bit more interesting, and the runes really spice up the combat. The Skyrim combat does feel a bit repetitive after a while after playing many similar games like it, but that's just my opinion. I'm now going to get into the story of both games. Fuck! I'm now going to get into the story of both these games without spoiling too much, and to sum it up, it's a quality versus quantity type of deal. The main plot of Skyrim is pretty simple. You are the Dragonborn and your destiny is to kill Otterwood, one nasty ass dragon. It's a bit cliche, but it gets the job done. But the story itself is dragged down by uninteresting characters. Most of the characters involved are not really memorable besides Parthenox. They really don't do anything interesting and they just tell you what to do. However, the lore is very deep within the story in usual Elder Scrolls fashion, so it makes up for that. What shines the most out of the quests in Skyrim are the side quests with plot. There are at least 6 side quests with better quality story than the main quest. While not the greatest stories of all time, they do provide a lot of content for the player to explore. Breath of the Wild's plot, on the other hand, takes a little bit to explain. You are Link, and you awaken to find Ganon, the bad guy, having control of Hyrule Castle, and you gotta defeat him to save Hyrule and Zelda. And technically, that's it. You just go and defeat him. Although it'll be really hard because you didn't do any of the other content, which is expected for you to do. To explain it briefly, the player seeks out 4 large machines known as the Divine Beasts, which were built long ago to fight Ganon, but now he took control of them. Each one was piloted by a champion, a representative of each race who were to ally Link but died when Ganon took control of the Divine Beast, and you, the player, has to free them as well as taking back the Divine Beast. One flaw I had with the story is the repetitive formula of each Divine Beast quest. Each one you do the same objectives only with a different cast of characters and setting. But each champion were interesting in unique ways, and the game tells you through memories the player rediscovers, which I thought was a creative way of doing it. But I did feel that some champions were stronger and weaker than others when it came to storytelling. I thought Mito's story was definitely better than the rest, while Revali's was not really on par with the other champions' stories. While I really like Breath of the Wild's plot more than Skyrim's, a major flaw with Breath of the Wild is the lack of interest in side quests. There is only one side quest with an interesting plot and is also as repetitive as the main story. The rest of the side quests are simple, give me X amount of Y type of quests, which do get stale really quick. As I said before, it's kind of a quality versus quantity type of deal with Skyrim and Breath of the Wild's stories, but personally I prefer Breath of the Wild's quality storytelling over Skyrim's quantity storytelling. I do feel like soundtrack is the most subjective category, but I'll try my best to get factual points on each game's soundtrack. If you haven't noticed already, I play parts of each soundtrack when talking about the respective games to help you familiarize yourself with them. Skyrim's soundtrack is mostly ambient, but never once I felt the music get repetitive or boring due to a great variety between the different soundtracks. The music in combat never felt repetitive or boring too, and would only seem to play when a fight was formidable, which helped to keep it from being overused. One point I mentioned in the gameplay aspect part of this video was that dragons were one of the more harder fights in Skyrim. A smart move made by the developers was to only play the most intense music whenever you encountered them, which boosted the overall Skyrim experience. The quality of the soundtrack is top notch, and as someone who listens more to soundtracks than actual music, I would often pick a Skyrim piece from time to time. Breath of the Wild's soundtrack is mostly ambient too, but more minimalistic and quiet than Skyrim's. Because of this, it does feel repetitive after a while, but at least it's quiet enough for it to not feel annoying. There is a lack of variety between soundtracks too, especially in combat. I can only remember 2 different soundtracks for combat and each boss besides Lionel's having a main one. It does wear on the mind after a while. However, if you dig deep enough into this soundtrack, you can pull out some really good works of art. Each of the tracks when you attack the Divine Beast is some of the most fun soundtracks to listen to in my free time. There are also some small Easter eggs and such within some soundtracks. Some of them reference older Zelda games with their similarities, other ones have cryptic messages within them. For example, you can hear Morse code for SOS in the tracks when you're aboard the Divine Beast, referencing the champions trapped within them. It's a pretty cool detail. I would have to say that Skyrim has better quality soundtrack compared to Breath of the Wild, due to how well the tracks are handled and the overall quality despite the soundtrack itself being long. Overall, I do feel like Breath of the Wild was a more fun experience than Skyrim, but there is one thing I didn't bring up that should be brought up: replayability. Compared to Skyrim, Breath of the Wild doesn't offer many gameplay options that would make the game more replayable. The only thing that comes to mind is Master Mode, which is a DLC feature, and self-limitation like restricting yourself from getting more hearts or certain items or quests. In Skyrim, not only is there a legendary difficulty, but there is also 10 different races to play as with certain buffs and perks. There are also lots of quests with different choices and outcomes and tons of roleplaying potential. To put it simply, imagine Skyrim being a pretty good cake and Breath of the Wild being a very good cupcake. The cake tastes good and you can spend a lot of time eating it, but the cupcake tastes even better, but it's smaller than a cake. It's really your call which one you would prefer, and in my opinion, I can't decide which one is better. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and please leave your opinions and criticisms about the content in this video or the video itself in the comment section. Remember, this is all opinions, so try not to get triggered. This is Matt, and thanks for watching.